Okay, well, we're sitting at about 3 minutes after 9, so why don't we do a quick roundup of who's on. I know that we have, this is Paul Yunker with Michael Baker. I know that we have Mark Corcoran on my staff on. I also heard Monique, Janine, Amira, and Mary Lynn, who has not been identified there.
This is Bella. I'm here as well.
Thank you, Bella. Bella is also on our staff with Michael Baker. Anyone else?
Megan Headley.
Megan?
Yes.
Valerie. Say
Valerie in for Casey O'Neill.
Valerie for Casey O'Neill?
Sitting in for Casey O'Neill, who was on vacation.
Okay. I heard Megan, I heard Valerie, and did I miss somebody in there?
Penelope Andrews.
I'm sorry, say again?
Penelope Andrews.
Penelope. Thank you, Penelope.
I'm in another time zone, so I know that it's too much. So yeah, it's so quiet where I am. Everyone's asleep.
Okay. So thank you all for joining us this morning. It's pretty short notice, and making time in your schedule is always appreciated, especially with this fairly quick turnaround. We have a lot to cover in an hour, and I'm going to just go ahead and get started. My name is Paul Yunker. I and Mark Corcoran will be the co-leads for Michael Baker in assisting you all with developing regulations for the Mendocino County cannabis overlay. We also have on the call Della Acosta, and Della is going to be helping us with technical support. We would ask that when you send messages in to us, we'd like to get you all in the habit of copying all three of us. That way we'll all be able to stay up to speed. So that's just a bit of housekeeping on our end. I want to acknowledge that you, as individuals in your groups, have long worked on cannabis regulations. It's a fundamental part of your community. But you're way ahead of us as far as understanding what the local issues, needs, and goals are. We're going to play catch up as quickly as we can, but please understand if we need a little bit of background or support, just help us get caught up with where you are at, and we'll do our best not to step back too far and to build on your good efforts so far. Baker is really here as facilitator and technical support. We don't come to this with any preconceived idea that the regulations should be one way or another. We're going to work with you as a group to try to get to consensus and then take that forward to the full overlay group and ultimately to the board. And we'll represent everyone's input as best we can. And if we ever get anything wrong, please just chime in and say, yeah, you know, something was overlooked and we would like you to consider it. But, you know, we're really just here to help you codify these regulations that are needed to address areas where the regulations currently are not letting people proceed with cannabis uses as they have historically and is generally supported by local communities. This call is about process. We were asked, it took us a little bit by surprise that we're going to be before the board on the 23rd. It had been our expectation that we were going to have long working meetings with each of the subgroups on January 26th. When the request came to go to the Board of Supervisors and provide an update on process and to give some feedback from the two subgroups, really the opt-in and the opt-out subgroups, we quickly scheduled this call. We're really looking for your initial thoughts on the process, on our approach, and whether the goals of a 6-month ordinance adoption are realistic, whether the general particulars of what we've talked about seem to meet what you think are the needs and the goals of this effort. So we really don't want to get into the specifics of the provisions today, keeping it more a little bit at the level of, do we understand the right steps, and do we think we can execute on this kind of a work plan? Does that all make sense to everyone?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So to start out, we did our best to quickly put together a thought piece that was circulated on Monday. You got the brief write-up, about a 2-page write-up. I'd like to just give you all a chance to respond to that memo, and if there's anything that was concerning in the memo as far as approach or initial reactions, anything that you want to identify. We don't want to get into too much discussion, just want to understand if you have concerns and where those concerns are. So maybe we could start there. Could we just go around and all, we're still figuring out the best way to do this, but conference calls are a little bit awkward. So I'm going to just run through the list. Monique, any initial thoughts on the list?
Not at this time. I'm just going to let other people speak, so one more time.
Okay. Janine, any thoughts? I know you sent me a message.
Yes, thank you. I really, really appreciated the list and the sentiment therein and all the topics that were covered. I feel like it's a really good framework. My only concern, which I did voice in my email, is in regard to the plan to execute 3 community overlays in this time period and how that will relate to additional communities because we do have a timeline challenge going on in regard to cannabis permitting, and so more details about what the vision is there would be helpful. Thank you.
And just so I understand, I read your comment that you would like to see more than just the 3, and that the limit of the 3 is the concern. Did I get that right?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Amira, anything you want to throw out at this time?
I do agree with the limiting it to the 3 groups, and I would love to say that if we could actually be goal-oriented to coming up with the process so that it would be adaptable based on community by defining the boundaries eventually, that would be a wonderful way, in my opinion, of making it an overlay option that people can just jump in and have a formula that they can adapt to their individual areas. And So that was really my only comment and thought on that. Instead of making it, okay, these one areas are doing it this way, let's just create a formula that any area can adapt.
Okay, and that's clearly in the cards because primarily we were asked to create an overlay process, but then also to go ahead and test it out and try to establish it. So I think that your interest there will be met. Let's see, Megan, anything?
No, I'm concerned about non-cultivation activities in areas. That's my aim for this.
So I think what you're saying is you're interested in having other commercial cannabis uses besides cultivation allowed.
Yes, and yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to restate things back like that so that I make sure we're getting it right. So, okay, I think Valerie, any thoughts?
Everybody's already said what my concerns were, thanks.
Okay, and Penelope.
Actually, I was going to bring up the same thing about picking just 3 communities, and all the other communities that aren't being picked basically probably would be out of the game by the time the rest of it was implemented. And some of these communities are so small that they're not going to have a second chance. It's already, everybody's being left behind right now. So I think if you're going to implement something, it's got to be, different areas are going to have to be able to opt in. So I kind of agree with the people, what they were saying as well.
Okay, that's helpful, and we'll, time allowed, I'd like to circle back to the logistics of adding more areas, but, we'll if we don't get to it today, then we'll be getting to that very soon in our next conversation. Marilyn, any thoughts?
So, Paul, I'm not part of your email group, so I didn't receive any of this information. I just got an email from Nash telling me to listen in today, so I don't have that before me. And I apologize for Nash. He had a doctor's appointment this morning, so he won't be on any of the calls this morning. So with that said, I'm just going to listen, and I get the gist of what everyone's saying. So thank you very much, Paul.
Excellent. And let me make sure, did I in fact catch everybody who is a member of the subgroup? Have I overlooked anybody on my list? Okay, we're doing pretty good then. Next topic I'd like to describe is what we think is a good way to take on this fairly complex subject. We think that there can be a 2-step process as we move forward. The first step is establishing a regulatory framework, and the second step is then putting the details on that framework. So I'm going to explain a little bit what I mean by that. In my world, when I'm a land use planner, so I often am reviewing development projects. And so I use the term deal points. I think it's a fair description of what we're going to be talking about. What are the deal points of these regulations? What are they going to accomplish in a big sense? I'm going to run through some things that I think are deal points that we're going to want to talk about. Does an opt-in allow any commercial cannabis use? So this is along the lines of Megan's comment. Is it manufacture? Is it other testing uses, distribution? So that's something I think we're going to have to establish in our framework. Would new commercial uses be by right or be subject to a use permit? So that's, again, we're talking about these new opt-in zones. Can anybody do anything by right, or do they have to go through some type of discretionary review process? Another, kind of big deal point is, will there be some type of petition or vote of affected community members? There doesn't have to be, but that's something that I think we as a group can say, does that make sense? It's it's cumbersome. It's an extra step, but it is a good way to make sure that the members of the affected community really have a voice. So that's something we're going to have to work through. Do we have some kind of voter petition? Are all opt-in zones identical? Maybe one community has an opt-in zone that has certain rights and certain limitations, but they're different than a neighboring community. So that these could be unique, or we could say, gosh, that's getting too fancy that far. Let's just keep opt-in zones uniform across the county. I don't know if there's a right answer yet, but it's just these are, things we're going to have to work through. We're going to probably build this list of deal points fairly quickly, and that will be one of the first efforts, is to say, okay, what's the framework of this this opt-in regulations? Once we get that, we'll check in with the overall cannabis overlay working group. So that would be a first step. And I think we want to be to the overlay working group in about a month, which is really, really soon. If we're working on a 6-month time frame, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, that would mean we'd have to quickly identify these deal points. We'd have to work hard to reach a consensus position and prepare this framework. And, in the next 4 or 5 weeks or so, there's no magic date there, but getting to the overlay working group with that regulatory framework. Once they have a chance to review it and buy off on it, and probably also checking in with the county to make sure we have a framework that is supported by decision makers, then we jump on the actual regulations. I will say that also, before we get into the detailed regulations, we would need to run that framework through our legal review process to make sure we're not creating any major fatal flaws. Once we've got that framework through you as a subgroup, through the overlay group, county buy-off, and the legal check, then we would swing quickly into putting the details of how this overlay regulation would work. And I think that in order to keep on track, we would then have another month or so to work through the details. So, in general, what I just described is a 2-step process. Focus first on the regulatory framework, get buy-off on that, then swing into the detailed regulations that would fill out this section of the ordinance. I'm going to stop there and see what your thoughts as a group are. Does that feel like a workable approach that's going to get us where we need to be? I can run down the list, or I can just let people comment in. What's the preference? Run down the list? Sure. Okay. Any thoughts, Monique?
I agree. That's a great idea. I think it's a good starting point. And yeah.
Okay. Janine, what do you think? Is this working? Do we need to tweak it?
It sounds like a good framework, and I'm wondering if you can clarify the distinction between building out the details of the regulatory framework, what that second component is, distinct from the first.
If we, for instance, say we want to have some input by community members, we don't know exactly what it looks like. In the next step on the draft regulations, we would have specifics that it's either a petition submitted by affected property owners representing 50% of the land, or it's a mail-out ballot that will be circulated to all affected property owners, and all votes that are returned will be the basis of the decision. So there's there's a lot of nitty-gritty details if we choose to allow residents to somehow vote on this. At the framework stage, we'd only be saying, yeah, we really want to have people who are affected have a vote. At the regulation stage, we'd say exactly how it works.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the document would go from 2 pages to 20 pages, kind of, or 2 pages to 15 pages, something like that.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah, very much, thank you.
Okay. So, no, it seems workable to me.
It does seem like a good framework. Again, my concern is limiting the scope of outreach and input, because, the various communities have different needs and different zoning allowances, and so, I go back to being concerned around limiting the scope of our outreach and input as we're building the framework and missing particular considerations that would be found in distinct communities.
Okay, you jumped to item number 5 on our agenda, community and public involvement. So, it's a big, important subject, so we'll be getting there. And anything to add on the framework and the detailed regulations approach?
No, I think that's great to have a nice, simple, direct structure as you put it. Thank you.
Megan?
No.
I'm sorry, what was that? Okay, Valerie?
Sounds good.
Penelope?
Yeah, it sounds pretty good, but keep it as simple as possible due to the fact getting a license gets so complicated anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment for when we get into the regulations is don't let them turn into some convoluted and complex monster. Okay.
Right, because licensing is very complex anyway, and so many different rules, so please remember that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and keep us honest on that because we planners can get real fancy, and sometimes we forget. People who don't do this for a living, it can be very daunting. Okay, next subject is schedule. It's been conveyed to me that the board remains interested in pushing for completion of these regulations in 6 months. My comment to the county exec and to staff was, wow, that's really aggressive. But as I'm listening to the direction from decision makers. We're trying to build a schedule to get this done in 6 months. Please understand that the adoption process of regulations takes a couple of months. There's first a hearing before the Planning Commission, and then approximately 2 weeks later, a little bit more, the board can take up the regulations, and approximately 2 weeks after that, they can have second hearing, and before any meeting, there's public hearing noticing requirements. So just the adoption process, when all is said and done, and CEQA is done, and the regulations are done, are going to take 2 months. The CEQA process, reviewing, we don't think that this is going to be a substantial CEQA effort, but even if I don't know how familiar you all are with CEQA, but if this effort is determined exempt under CEQA, then no delay. If this effort requires preparation of what's called a mitigated negative declaration, that's kind of a mid-level CEQA document, we won't make 6 months because just the process and the circulation of that document will push us past 6 months. And we certainly hope this isn't the case, if something approaching an EIR is required, then the schedule is way, way off. And I would say that as we get into this, the level of CEQA review required may affect what we do within the regulations. So if something that you're very interested in is going to potentially result in big environmental impacts, we're going to have to look hard at that and say, are we willing to walk away from the schedule in order to include this additional use right? That's something that we'll be really balancing when we talk about the framework. Yes, you can have this type of regulations, but here's the impact on schedule. So CEQA will be a big factor in schedule, but also a big factor is how quickly can you as a subgroup come to consensus on the framework, and then, our ability to really reflect the broader interests of the community and the overlay group, so that when we go to the full overlay working group, they don't look at us and say, what are you all thinking? You didn't consider what we care about. So it's going to be very important that we represent the interests of the broader community and are thinking about what will be acceptable both to the broader community, the overlay working group, and ultimately to the elected officials who have to adopt this. Because if we're not looking downstream, we could spend a lot of time on regulations that ultimately can't be adopted. So this is really a question to you of 6 months. We have to have the framework of the regulations together in about 4 weeks, and we would have to put some detailed draft provisions on that framework about 4 weeks after that. Does that feel like a workable schedule to you all? So that's the big question that I want to be able to offer to the board. The subgroup felt like 6 months is a good stretch goal but doable, or the subgroup felt like it's unrealistic or somewhere in between. So I'm going to run through the list again, and yes, Monique, there you are at the top of the list. What do you think of the 6 month schedule, Monique?
I think that, of course, it might be possible. I do have concerns because we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, and it could end up taking a lot of time. And then with the CEQA, not knowing how that's going to be impacted, and that's a challenge. So, and if we are going to go past the 6 month time frame that the county wants this done in, I'm hoping that they're going to have something in place so that we can extend what's currently in our ordinance that's pushing us to that 6 month deadline for people. So if we had something like that, where maybe we have an extension on the sunset, or the applicants turning in their application by June 30th, if we know that this is going to take longer because of the CEQA, because of just the natural process, I think that would relieve a lot of us of this deadline and needing to meet it so concretely. So I don't know if that's the right word, but
that's a great observation, because we are somewhat being driven by a deadline that the board could modify if it so choose. I think that their willingness to extend the sunset would probably be, they would certainly need to see some really good progress. I don't know that that would be enough, but I think I could say with confidence that if we're spinning and not getting anywhere in 4 months, their willingness to extend sunset is probably less. Does that make sense? And if we're making really good progress and we can say we see the end in sight, I imagine, this is not confirmed yet, but I imagine that the board might have more willingness to extend the sunset. So just that's something that we'll convey on Tuesday, that concerned about the schedule and interested in whether there's any potential for sunset to be adjusted if we're making good progress. So thanks for that comment. Janine.
thank you. Let's see, a couple things. If it's possible to get some kind of list, and maybe Nash can help us with that, about what particular aspect would trigger either the mitigated neg deck or the EIR, I think that would really inform our process. And then the other thing that I sorry to be a broken record on this, but I really do feel that in terms of process, I feel like getting a pulse around the outreach could also inform the timeline, because I think, if county staff and county leadership had a sense of the enormous amount of interest that is out in all of these rural areas to move forward with an overlay, I think that would really inform timelines, because I think part of the interest on the county is to get greater participation into the permitting program. And because of the nature of our county, how segregated the communities have been because of prohibition and geography, I think there's a lot of communities that just haven't quite gotten the word that this process is afoot. So I just want to reiterate that I think that's an important piece to inform all layers of the process, including the timeline specifically.
Yeah, outreach is the most labor robust outreach could be the most labor-intensive part of this effort if we choose that. So I think you understand that, particularly if it's in person. We'll come back to that in just a moment, so I don't want to go too far into it, but it's a great observation. Mary?
I think that the more inclusive we goal-orient our project, the easier it'll be to tailor it to all of the different elements of the Mendocino County communities that would be interested. And I support the aggressive timeline. Personally, I think that it will be difficult and challenging, but I think that if we have clear goals that meet the needs of county, we are more likely to gain greater favor and more of what it is we seek to accomplish. And that's secret aside. Of course, that's a limiting factor, especially if we do end up with an EIR report. That's not something in our control. But that aside, I think we could do it. I believe in the people in this group and the goal and the intention set.
Okay. Because Bill and Mark are taking notes, just a couple of points I want to make sure we get in the notes, guys, is we do need to develop some type of response about what would potentially trigger different levels of environmental review. So we're going to want to develop that for the group fairly soon. So just make sure we put that on our to-do list. Let's see. Megan, I think you're next.
Yeah, I agree with trying to get it done as soon as possible. I feel like as a county, we're kind of still really kind of behind a little bit to the rest of the state, and I think that's important for all of us to be able to move forward. But also, I don't want to have to rush it and then leave things out and then have it not be totally completed. So.
Okay, and my experience with regulations and zoning codes, and not specifically with cannabis, but lots of other subjects, is these things are never done, and they're never perfect, and you do the best job you can, and then there should be some willingness to go back and say, we didn't quite get that right, and let's keep working on it. So I guess let's not let striving for perfect keep us from doing something good and beneficial. So we'll have to test that line as we go, but this is, we want to get a big step forward to creating a process to legal commercial cultivation within the county in areas where it's currently not allowed. Valerie, thoughts?
Yeah, having done already quite a bit of outreach here in Laytonville, the time it's taken, and my area is pretty simple. I mean, I've walked my neighborhood, and there's over 200 parcels that are affected just in this area that I'm representing. And just doing that, walking, putting up notices at individual houses, posters, trying to get announcements in the newspaper, getting people to the meetings. We have had 3 meetings, but I'm just really concerned that 6 months. I definitely would love to have it done in 6 months, but also having actually had boots on the ground, I know that it takes quite a bit of time, and especially, like what I think Jimmy was saying, with prohibition, farmers keep their heads down. Things have been changing. There's a lot of trust that has not been engendered by the county because things are constantly changing, plus law enforcement seems to just ride roughshod over pretty much anything that's being done. So farmers tend to be really cautious about coming forward. So 6 months, I think, let's go for it. And I like what you said, Paul, that being flexible, that, the county needs to realize that we need to be flexible to, really do this right.
Okay, and Penelope, bring us home on this one.
As part of agriculture licensing is to bring as many farmers into the program, which will in turn help with environmental issues that some farmers are causing along with other industries. I think that trying to keep this as quick as possible is actually to advantage to the environment and the whole community as a whole. So hopefully the aggressive timeline will cover this and keep it as simple as possible. Thank you very much.
Okay, in just the quickest of summary, what I hear is you'll support moving quickly. You recognize and understand and want to learn more about the edges of CEQA and how different uses would affect the timeline. And there's a desire for as much effective public involvement as we can get, but understand that there's a little bit of a tension between meeting a deadline and being inclusive. So those seem like the big takeaways to me. The next subject we want to touch on is community public involvement. As we drafted our initial proposal, we threw out there what really was a placeholder for public involvement, because public involvement, community engagement can take so many forms, and we just really didn't have a lot from the county on what was wanted. As we've been working with the county, listening to the board, it seems to be evolving that the preferred approach is to get much of the input on this effort from the subgroups and the overlay working group. That you folks would be the representatives of the community, that you have a lot of knowledge about the interests and desires of the community, and while you won't get everything 100% right, you are a very good and well-connected sounding board. So the thought is, instead of having lots and lots of meetings in groups, I think you have a maintenance assessment, and I forget what the term, but you have community groups, formal community representation in some of your communities. There's less formal organizations, but I think the direction we're moving is not to spend a lot of time out in the county, but rather to be working directly with you folks to develop the framework and the regulations, and then to make our key draft products, the framework and the initial draft regulations, widely available via internet, and then rely on meetings primarily in Ukiah to get input from the broader community. We also understand that any community that's going to be considered for an overlay zone at this time, we will have a meeting in that community. So we will go out for community meetings, at least one community meeting in each location that's a candidate for an overlay zone. So that's not terribly robust public outreach, but I think to some extent there may may be a feeling that there's been a lot of community discussion already. We have some very well-connected, well-educated folks working with us already, and it's maybe time to stop just going out to the community over and over and get down and just draft the regulations. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the sense I'm getting from the county is let's get moving on this and let's stop talking about getting moving. What do y'all think about that? Is this, are you comfortable being the sounding board for the community, first of all, and are you willing to carry the message back out if you happen to be a representative from Laytonville? Are you willing to take on going to some Laytonville meetings and sharing and getting the word out that there's materials available at such and such website? That puts a burden on you to help us get the word out, but just really want to go around the group and see, first of all, what do you think of this relatively focused public involvement, and secondly, are you willing to take on that burden, which is you being the representatives for the community and being the conduit for the community? So that's a lot to ask of you. Monique, what are your thoughts?
I definitely feel like I can be involved in that way. I think I'm already sort of doing that in my community of Covelo, and I've kind of, volunteered for that, and we're all volunteering our time right now. I think this group, as well as the broader overlay group, are really all committed individuals that want to better the whole community, not just our own little areas. And so I think that we could be effective if we take on this extra responsibility, because I feel like we're kind of already doing that. But again, in this small 6-member group, I think I don't know that we're all representing different areas necessarily, so that's one concern I do have. But yeah, I think we're all, I can say personally that I'm willing to put in whatever hours outside of meeting with you to get this going and start hosting meetings right now in Covelo. And I mean, I'm really more rural, but I could, offer support to other communities outside of that area if needed. But I'm willing to do whatever needs to happen as a representative for the whole county, really. So, but specifically Covelo. But
excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jimmy, what are your thoughts on the outreach?
Thanks. So I think that there's some really excellent representation for some communities, and I think at least half of the county is severely underrepresented and also underinformed. I work with several organizations that are working countywide around cannabis advocacy and have reached out to a number more. I think I have 17 organizations that are willing to support outreach. The challenge there, though, is really, I think we would be seeking tools from the county and from your company to assist in that outreach. So if we can utilize websites, social media, that really helps a lot because of the geographical disparity and also the trust issue with regard to unpermitted operators. I do have, concerns around this, which I've already voiced, but I think, if we can get some support, I think everyone on this call, and there's a whole bunch of other people that are behind us supporting this effort, are willing to do our best to support outreach, but I think we'll really need support Michael Baker and the county with some tools and parameters to go out and try and be effective in a short time with.
Okay. Amara.
Yes, I think that we do have some wonderful tools that we could collaborate with literature that is drafted by you guys so that we're representing what is accurate to the best of our ability. But I would also say that we have wonderful radio stations and wonderful independent journalists and news media that are willing to publicize whatever information they can receive that benefits the Mendocino County community as a whole, and we can tap into those to help get the information out so that the outreach program can really go broad spectrum in a quick period of time if we include those aspects of communication. So I think it can be done, and I'm happy to help in any way possible.
Okay, fantastic. Megan?
Yeah, I'm from the Spylock area up in Laytonville, and I'm happy to do any kind of outreach that I can in my area specifically. Some things that would be helpful are some things other people said, like links to websites or some kind of pamphlet or something that I could give to people so they could get more informed themselves.
Okay, Valerie?
Yeah, Casey and I are part of a subcommittee for our Municipal Advisory Council. Our MAC is very organized, and so that's why they formed this subcommittee in order to really find out, is there a need or, a want in our area, which we discovered that there truly is. We also have the support of the newspaper that comes out weekly. Also, during our meetings, I collected email lists, and I have an email list of the folks that have them and wanted to be included. Also, I've been on radio. Casey's been on the radio, and again, because my area is more logistically easy to reach. Like I said, I've already walked my neighborhood twice, putting up notices, and for the 3 meetings that we've had, putting up posters seems to work also. I am willing, and I'm just going to kind of volunteer Casey, but I know someplace I read that, if there's somebody that's willing to go to other areas to have meetings, I'm definitely willing to do that, and then I suspect that Casey is as well.
Excellent. Let's see, Penelope.
Hi, I got involved with this process when I realized the whole of South Leggett and Leggett area were basically locked out of being able to get into licensing due to the zoning. And so I've already started having meetings and inviting our supervisor to the area. So I was definitely going to continue to try to outreach, but people are very suspicious of the process, and the simpler the better. A lot of people don't have internet, so I probably posters, and I have the radio is definitely available. I do a lot of broadcast with KMUD up in Humboldt, but we broadcast in northern Mendocino and on the coast. So it would be great to get Casey up to South Leggett for maybe some meetings to help as this process goes along. There's a lot of interest and also a lot of need because there are no other industries in South Leggett, and traditionally this has been going on for quite a long time. Very small parcels, small farmers who actually did keep to the 215 cottage rules for many, many years. So the people are pretty upset that they're sort of locked out. So I'm definitely going to do all the outreach I can in that community and anywhere really. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, and I think we're going to, Della, Mark, we're going to want to consider it. And now we just shared that a lot of people do not have internet. I was assuming that web-based internet would be a good option for getting materials distributed. So we want to think about areas that aren't going to be covered and maybe particularly focus on those. If it is kind of geographic patterns because there's not cell or internet service or whatever the reason is, if we can identify locations where there isn't good internet coverage, then maybe that would be a place to focus a little bit more of our attentions. So, thank you to everyone. Go ahead, what?
Posters and radio have been quite useful. Our local radio station and posters have been quite useful.
Okay, great. And thank you to everyone. I heard a lot of willingness to step up and carry the message out to the community, and that's wonderful. Really appreciate it. We're closing in on completion. I wanted to talk a little bit about next steps. as mentioned, Mark and I will be going to the board of supervisors to provide an update on this discussion. We're also going to have a conversation in 30 minutes with the opt-out group, and so we'll be representing these two groups and what we hear from these groups to the board and letting them know if we feel like we have a game plan to work through this. I'm feeling fairly encouraged from what I've heard from your group, so that's great. Since we are going to be in Ukiah, and it is a fair hike for us to get there, and in the 3 meetings that I've had in Ukiah, I've gone all the way out there and met for about an hour and a half each time. So I'm real interested in making sure these trips get as much value as possible. We're interested in whether representatives from this group want to get together in person next Tuesday. If that works with your schedule, we think we could probably have a good next step on this discussion, particularly coming out of the board comments in the morning. I think we're up at 10 o'clock, so what we would be looking at is, do you as a group have availability to continue the discussion on the afternoon of the 23rd, and would you be interested in doing that in person? So I'll ask you to just kind of tell me yay or nay. Monique, what do you think? Afternoon of the 23rd?
I'm going to be down there already and planning to go to that board meeting to speak and just see how that plays out. And I just want to hope that I could be able to still see that board meeting through, but I think that's going to take up the whole day. So I don't know what time frame you would want to meet, like right after you speak with the board, an hour after the lunch break. Yeah, I'll be down there. And
so I think what you're saying, and I've seen this firsthand, is I think I have the cannabis item in front of the board, and then I find out there's also a cannabis item before me and two after me. Is that what you're? There's lots of cannabis discussions will occur on the 23rd.
Yeah, they're really important.
Yeah,
I think so.
Okay, well, I hate to create one or the other situation, so maybe we need to think about that. But at this point, we need to have our track shoes on and be running if we have any hope of meeting anything like a 6-month schedule. So let's keep going down the list. Janine, availability, afternoon of the 23rd?
Yeah, it would be my pleasure. I would love to meet in person.
Okay, Amira?
Yes, I would as well. I think that is my priority.
Okay. Megan?
No, I'm going to be traveling that day, so I will not be able to meet on the 23rd.
Okay, and this will be the case. Not everyone will be able to make every meeting. Our commitment is to catch up to anybody who misses a meeting with a briefing. So we'll make sure that you keep pace with the group. Valerie, the 23rd.
I'm with Casey. Well, Casey, like I said, he's on vacation. He won't be back until the 25th. I have an appointment in Santa Rosa at 6 o'clock that evening, so I would need to leave at the latest by 4, but I'm available that whole day. And I don't know if this is an appropriate time to make a request, that there's been a couple of people that have been very involved in drafting the comments and questions for the overlay working group that I believe you got, Paul. And I'm wondering, I know we're trying to keep this group small, but there's a couple of players that I think are very valuable. And, that would be Jude Stillman and Hannah, the attorney that's been working really heavily on this. And I'm wondering if they can be included, if they're there, can they be included in the face-to-face?
Could you please just shoot me an email with the names and I'll run them by the county, because the county actually established the working group, so I wouldn't want to make any commitment about expanding membership without checking with the county.
Paul, this is
I haven't asked them either.
Paul, Paul, this is Mary Lynn. They have been part of the working group. I don't know why they're not on the phone call today. So I don't know if they didn't get the email. I'm not sure. So they've been historically part of it.
Are they part of the subgroup?
That I do not know.
Right.
This is Janine. I can clarify. Jude is part of the exceptions group, and Hannah requested to be a part of the opt-out group when we were discussing mixed membership. And they are certainly heavily involved. We've been meeting all week about this, and so I imagine that they would love to meet and would be valuable contributors if that's possible.
Okay, and we will be extending the same invitation to the opt-out folks. The exceptions group is trailing a little bit because I think the exceptions group is going to be probably the most straightforward to work with. The opt-in and opt-out as overlays are a little bit more complex overall. But I think Valerie, I think you were the one sharing the additional names. If you want to send those to me, I would want to check in with Nash and Janelle before we expand any participation in any meetings. I just don't want to be willy-nilly including or excluding because I think then different people might wonder, well, why not one more, and such. So just please do forward the names, and then we can take that under consideration. Okay?
Yeah, I'll ask their permission. I'll see if they do want to come, and then yes, I will definitely give you the username.
Okay. The 23rd.
I would love to be there, but I am out of the country till the 24th. But hopefully somebody will remember to include Southland in any of your discussions.
Okay, and we'll get you caught up upon return as far as what we talk about.
I do, however, know that Karen Byers would have liked to be here, but she had some prior appointment on this phone call.
Yeah, I did get the, where would Karen represent?
Karen's Yeah, and she's also quite supportive of Southland because she's been in that.
Oh, perfect. Because I did get her decline of the meeting, and I assumed it was just simply not available, so thanks for letting us know that. Okay, so that'll be,
Hopefully she can make it.
I think we're going to proceed. It sounded like we could get about probably 5 representatives. That's enough, I think, to do some good work. There's no decisions being made at this point. We're just trying to keep forward momentum. So we'll plan on probably an early afternoon, January 23rd meeting, and we'll get an invite out to you for that. Just the other next steps that we're working on, we will be putting together a detailed schedule that will, put some details next to what the subgroup needs to do, when we would anticipate meeting, when we would anticipate getting to the overall working group, when we would anticipate getting to community meetings, board and planning commission and board briefings, and just the whole kind of detailed schedule of meetings so that we can get those programmed out in advance and hopefully minimize any conflicts with anyone's schedules. Let's see, is there good or bad times for you as individuals? If you could just offline send messages to Della, Mark, and myself, if you know that Tuesdays are always going to be bad because I have a commitment, or Thursdays are always going to be bad, any times that we should avoid. We don't want to be in a position where we're consistently missing someone because of a schedule conflict. So if you know you have any times that you simply won't be able to meet, or if you have plans to travel in the next couple of months, let us know those, because we'll push times around to allow people to participate as much as possible. Undoubtedly, we're going to have some meetings where not everybody's going to attend, but we want to be as sensitive as possible. So that's my ask of you is if there's times you know are bad or times you know you will be unavailable, just send us a note and we'll consider those as we build our schedule. That's our material that we wanted to cover. Just kind of a closeout. Any comments from you on the process, thoughts, anything we haven't covered that you want to share? So this is kind of just for the good of the order. Monique, any last thoughts before we close out?
No, I just wanted to ask if you could provide the emails for the other two members of your organization that you wanted us to email. I think it was Mark, and I don't have those people's emails.
I'd be happy to do it. I think if you look at the message that I sent out, you'll see them there as well.
Oh, okay, perfect.
I think they were copied on that message.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Janine, any closing thoughts?
I just want to say thank you. I'm really encouraged by this meeting and the approach that you're taking to facilitating, so thank you so much.
You bet. Amira?
Again, I agree with the thank yous. Thank you very much. I look forward to resolving these issues and getting them straight to the county as quickly as possible.
Excellent. Megan?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you as well to everyone for their time and effort on all of these issues.
Fabulous. Valerie?
Yeah, good to go.
Penelope?
Yeah, thank you for putting it started.
Well, this is really going to happen because of your commitment and your time and your good work. So I think we owe you a really big thank you for getting on the call very quickly and also, continuing going forward to make time. So let's call it a wrap, and we'll be sending out an invite. Even if you're not going to be able to attend the meeting on the 23rd, you'll still get an invite and you'll still get any materials, so you'll be able to look those over. And then following the meeting, we'll provide a summary of what was discussed and any outcomes. There was a request either from this group or the opt-out group of whether these calls will be recorded. We do not have currently any technology to record calls and hadn't really anticipated doing that. And that's something that this group feels like is needed. I will say we'll be preparing our notes from the meeting and we'll send them out to the group so we will have both a record and can make any comments if we missed anything. Is that an adequate record of these working meetings?
So, Paul, this is Mary Lynn. I'm recording it. Carmel asked that I should have let everyone know in the beginning that it is being recorded. So I do have a recording of it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, I knew we did not have that capacity
we've
Baker, so thank you.
We've been recording all of our working groups, so we wanted to continue on with that. Thank you.
Well, that's great. Then we have an absolute record of everything, so that's great. So that will be available.
Wonderful.
Okay.
And how, can I ask a question? How will those calls be made, those recordings be made available?
So I'm not sure in the past, did she make those available to everyone? I'm not sure how it worked. Does anyone?
This is Janine. I believe that they're posted on the county website.
Okay, so this will go to the executive office, and if I'm not sure who's posting these nowadays, but we'll see if we can get it on there. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, well, I think that's a wrap. I again appreciate everybody's time and look forward to putting faces to voices for the most part on the 23rd. So thank you on behalf of Baker and look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Mm-hmm.